Okay, my friends, it is Wednesday, June 4th, 2025, and something bad is brewing. Let me talk about this here. So, Putin is threatening massive retaliation for what just happened to a third of his bombing force. Ukraine wiped out dozens of Russia's doomsday nuclear bombers in massive surprise attack on air bases. Kyiv says Russia's Pearl Harbor. This was just a couple of days ago. And then they hit the Crimean Bridge. The Crimean Bridge looks like it's still okay. I mean, it hit underwater at the pylons, but apparently it's still okay. It's not out of service. So Russia's pretty upset. Putin's pretty upset. Daily Mail says Russia may launch nuclear strike on Ukraine. Russia could strike Ukrainian airfields with tactical nuclear weapons. This grim warning comes from a British colonel. The horrifying reality, he says, is that the calculation could work. World leaders would not respond with nuclear weapons over Ukraine. So it's an open question if Putin was to use Orishniks or a nuke or something along those lines, would the West say, "Oh, that's we're not doing anything else about that," or would it stiffen their resolve to say, "No, you can't do this. This you've crossed lines." I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know what Putin was saying. Let me finish this. The New York Times reported that the U.S. fears a Russian retaliatory strike following Ukraine's Spiderweb operation, which disabled dozens of Russian military assets. So, again, here's what Putin was saying about this thing. Let's show this. Here's Greg Terry did the voiceover for me, and for that, I'm grateful. Let's listen to this.
Recall that not long ago, the Ukrainian authorities and their allies dreamed of a strategic defeat of Russia on the battlefield. Today, amid enormous losses and retreating along the entire line of contact, in an attempt to intimidate Russia, the Kyiv leadership has turned to organizing into terrorist acts. And at the same time, they are asking to suspend hostilities for 30 or even 60 days. They are requesting a high-level meeting. But how can such meetings take place under these conditions? What is there to talk about? Who even negotiates with these who bet on? And why should they be rewarded by granting them a pause in hostilities, which would be used to rearm the regime with Western weapons, to continue forced mobilization, and to prepare further attacks like those carried out in the Bryansk and the Kursk regions? This does not happen for the first time. This does not surprise us, but only convinces us that the current Kyiv regime, peace is not needed at all. Peace for most, it is like the loss of power, and power for this regime apparently is more important than peace and the lives of people whom they apparently do not consider their own.
Okay, so that's what Putin was saying. Putin's talking about it as if, no, they just want power. They don't want like it's this weird mirroring effect that happens when he speaks. So after he said that, so this was the day before yesterday. Yeah, Alexander Dugin said yesterday Ukrainians with obvious support of NATO have an obvious support of NATO. What? What do you mean obvious support of NATO? NATO wasn't involved in this at all. Have attacked Russia's nuclear weapons planes. It does not matter. They failed. Well, they didn't fail. It was a remarkable success. According to Russian nuclear doctrine now, Moscow has to, not just can, it has to retaliate. Did Trump want that? Was he elected to tolerate that? Okay, so that's where Dugin is. And then Trump was just on the telephone call with Putin. I'm not going to read this because I just did a video with Greg Terry. Go back and look at that video where we just unpack this whole thing. It was now posted on Truth Social, and then it was taken down and weirdly, and then it went up on the White House website on X, or White House channel on X. I just finished speaking by telephone with President Vladimir Putin of Russia. I called the call lasted approximately an hour and 15 minutes, and it was a terrible call. Like you would hope for some strong statement of Vladimir, don't do this, but it wasn't anything like that. You can go back to that last video. Okay, Now, meanwhile, Senator Richard Blumenthal, he's the co-sponsor with Lindsey Graham in the Senate, compares the strikes on Russian airfields to the bin Laden raid. Democrat U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal praised the recent strikes on Russian military airfields, calling them a uniquely large-scale and effective operation compared to that 2011 elimination of Osama bin Laden. This was actually Keith Kellogg saying, I spoke with Senator Lindsey Graham. The bill is called the Russia Sanctions Act of 2025. They have 82 U.S. senators already signed on. So you got a super majority already there. And I think the House is going to break with them as well. Now, my read is that if the Speaker of the House just said, and he did, that we're ready, a lot of members want to move forward on this, he wouldn't be saying that without Trump's knowledge or approval. So I think there's a good appetite within Congress to do this, but there's not from the Trump administration. Look at this. Republicans against Trump. Donald Trump asked the Senate to delay consideration of the Russia sanctions bill, according to the Senate Armed Services Committee Chair Roger Wicker. So we'll see how it plays out. I think there's more and more momentum in the House and the Senate moving that direction. And eventually it's going to be something that happens, even though Trump just keeps pausing it for whatever reason or trying to slow things down. Okay. Meanwhile, a third round of talks between Ukraine and Russia could take place by the end of the month, but only, this is according to the first deputy head of the Russia Duma's Foreign Affairs Committee, but only if there are no more attacks on strategic aviation airfields. You don't get to dictate that. I mean, so they really did field this attack on the airfield. Darth Putin put this out. Pretty soon, Donald will condemn the drone attacks as it upsets the nuclear balance. Because if you want to know what he'll say tomorrow, listen to what the Kremlin says today. And lo and behold, well, it actually was in reverse, because what Putin said came out today, but this came out yesterday where Keith Kellogg was saying this.
I'm telling you, the risk levels are going way up. I mean, what happened this weekend, people have to understand in the national security space, when you attack an opponent's part of their national survival system, which is their triad, the nuclear triad, that means your risk level goes up because you don't know what the other side's going to do. You're not sure. And that's what they actually did. And the one that really concerned me was the fact that there have been reports that they attacked the northern fleet headquarters in Severomorsk. And if that's the case, if when you attack two legs of a triad, that first of all, it was a very bold attack. And when you do that, it's very clear the risk levels will go up. And I think that's what.
So the risk levels have gone up. All right. So Ben Hodges said, can we please get some real experts into this administration who can understand who and what Russia is? The risk of Russian escalation actually only goes up when we're weak, hesitant, and tremble in front of their threats. So, yeah. Okay. Meanwhile, Yermak told Trump envoy Steve Witkoff while he was visiting in D.C. yesterday or the day before, Russia's stance in Istanbul's talks remains unconstructive. He called for tougher sanctions and invited Witkoff to Ukraine to see the battlefield reality firsthand. I highly doubt that Witkoff would go to Ukraine to see the battlefield firsthand. Okay, the first time in 3 years, U.S. Defense Secretary will skip the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting, the Ramstein format. Pete Hegseth will arrive in Brussels only after the session ends and will not participate even by video. They will send the ambassador. The U.S. ambassador to NATO will represent the United States in place of Defense Secretary Hegseth, according to Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Liberty. So that's not necessarily the greatest news. Meanwhile, Russia's former defense minister Shoigu has arrived in North Korea for talks with leader Kim Jong-un. So while the U.S. is not sending their high-level representative to this meeting, Russia is sending their own to North Korea. And France is providing Ukraine with $1.5 billion in financial guarantees for defense procurement from French companies and joint military production, while Britain, I should say, Britain will deliver 100,000 drones to Ukraine by April 2026. But then you see stuff like this. So discouraging. France and Belgium have declined to support the European Commission's plan to phase out imports of Russian gas, which they depend on heavily for funding their war machine, by 2027. citing the need for more clarity on the economic and legal implications, Politico reports. France prefers seeking alternative suppliers like Qatar and warns of potential legal risks for companies such as Total Energies. Belgium requests a detailed impact of the assessment before committing. Both countries remain among the EU's top importers of Russian liquefied natural gas. So that's going on at the same time. Okay. I already talked about Blumenthal. Finally, we'll leave you with this from Darth Putin. Rewarding nuclear blackmail is not very risky for humanity. Well, he's replying to Richard Medhurst on June 2nd, saying Ukraine's operation was ingenious from a technical point of view. Richard Medhurst is not in Ukraine's corner. He's a very pro Russian. Very risky for humanity. Could have also easily resulted in nuclear war. It's always a few minutes to midnight until one day it isn't. And again, Darth Putin's reply was rewarding nuclear blackmail is not very risky for humanity. No, that's exactly the wrong strategy. That's exactly what you don't want to do. And then finally, just because this day in history, on this day in 1989, absolutely nothing happened to Tiananmen Square. Anyone who says otherwise will just disappear. You can see it on your iPhone. You can see it on your Galaxy Pixel 3. You can see it on your Galaxy S10. But on your Chinese-made phone, guess what? No, of course it's a meme. But you get the idea, right? All right. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.